You don't give a man a fish, but teach them how to fish. You don't give a man a fish, but teach them how to fish. Communities in action, that's the way to go. Communities in action, that's the way to
Hello and welcome to the program Communities in Action. Climate change is a matter of life and death, and it cannot be wished away in the entire world. The launch, therefore, of the National Adaptation Plan is a welcome project for the nation and particularly for the communities out there in the rural areas of Zimbabwe. Funded by the Green Climate Fund to the tune of $3 million United States dollars for the period 2019 to 2021, the project, titled Building Capacity to Advance a National Adaptation Planning Processes in Zimbabwe, is a game changer in the approach to dealing with the problem of climate change in Zimbabwe. The project, being implemented by the Climate Change Management Department, among other issues, focuses on improving Zimbabwe's adaptation governance to address capacity gaps and weaknesses in undertaking the National Adaptation Plan. Community support will be initiated through awareness-raising campaigns and training workshops. The two-day launch event in the city of Bulawayo was attended by about 100 participants from various sectors, including government officials, academia, civil society organizations, and community representatives from the districts.
First and foremost, the launch itself is provided the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Water, Climate and Rural Resettlement with a view of how the communities, how stakeholders perceive even the issue of climate change. And we've managed to identify some of the gaps, including the issues to do with awareness that is still lacking, mainstreaming that is not there, even in education as well as in adaptation planning within the districts, within the provinces. And it has brought also on board the students, the youths, who feel may be left out in the whole agenda, yet they are the future generation whom we are trying to safeguard through effective climate change mitigation and adaptation in this present day time. The National Adaptation Plan is a national document that will guide the implementation of climate change adaptation across the whole country. And in the process of developing this plan, there is need for effective consultations from the grassroots, that is at Homestead level, into the district, into the province, and then at national level with consolidation of the various pieces of information gathered from all the provinces. So at provincial level, first and foremost is to introduce now the National Adaptation Plan process to the provincial administration as well as the structures within the district, the DA and the rural district councils and EMA structures within those districts, as well as the civil protection unit and its structures within districts, so that we have a consolidated adaptation plan at district level, which will feed into the provincial level and then feeding into the national level, and then we consolidate it into one seamless structure of climate change adaptation as we plan the mainstreaming of climate change into development planning.
Engagement with policy and decision makers is meant to promote political buy-in, ownership of the processes with relevant line ministries and departments.
The Portfolio Committee on Lands, Agriculture, Water, Climate and Rural Settlement has actually been working with us over the years, and have got a knowledge on climate change which we are building within them. We have been with this committee to the climate change conferences like the COP24, which happened in December 2018, where we had the chair of the Portfolio Committee and about 6 members of the Portfolio Committee participated, and we also have organized a meeting of the Portfolio Committee to empower them in terms of climate change, so that they would understand the basics, the science of climate change, the ozone layer, the gases that are impacting the climate, as well as the legislation that we would want to carry forward or to develop as we move to implement some various provisions of the climate change agenda from global into local action. So the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee is really asked or has mandated the department and the ministry to come up with a draft legislation. This legislation is of particular importance, especially to the industry, to the waste sector, to the forestry sector, as well as the energy sectors, because as a country, we have obligations to reduce our emissions of our greenhouse gases that are inclusive of carbon dioxide, nitrous oxides, methane, among other gases, including the hydrofluorocarbons, which are used in refrigeration and air conditioning. We have to reduce them, and we have to reduce them by 33% per capita by 2030. And how would we do that? We need to do some audits in the industries to see how much they are emitting right now, both in industry, both in the dump sites. We need to know how much they are emitting in terms of methane, mines, fugitive emissions from mining, including methane. We need to know how much is coming out of that industry, among other sectors. Then once we know exactly how much we are emitting per sector, per industry, then we need to ensure that industries start implementing, I would say, emission reduction targets. We need to apportion them some targets to reduce, and they have to provide also information to the head office, to the Climate Change Management Department, for reporting on sectoral emissions of these greenhouse gases. This is under the transparency framework of the Paris Agreement. It's a requirement that we report in a very transparent manner the issues to do with climate change. And we cannot enforce this in industry without legislation. We need a law. Already we have got a statutory instrument that governs the export and importation of gases that are used in refrigeration and air conditioning. This is statutory instrument 131 of 2016. Which governs us in terms of how much we have to import and how much we have to use. Like as we stand with Zimbabwe, our quota, global quota, is just 270,000 kgs of those ozone depleting substances, including the hydrofluorocarbons and also hydrocarbons, you see, per year. So it's, if one is importing any of these gases, it's on a first come first serve. Once we reach the 270,000 cutoff, we no longer issue licenses. And this is in order for us to meet our obligations under the climate change agenda.
Communities in action, that's the way to go. Communities in action, that's the way to go.
Using the experience gained during the 2015 to 2018 period and stakeholder consultations, the Climate Change Management Department developed a roadmap to inform the development of the National Adaptation Plan from 2019 to 2022.
There's the preparatory elements that we're going to be looking at. Someone highlighted yesterday that we don't have information, we are not investing in research. So this project will have a very big component that will go towards us obtaining the information we need to be able to come up with informed plans. First and foremost, we'll analyze methodological and hydrological data from the past trends and come up with climate scenarios up to the year 2080, and then develop regional vulnerability assessments, develop a system to appraise adaptation options. You need to have a range of options. Scenarios, based on the scenarios, if we say that by 2050 rainfall in this district will decrease by 50%, then you need to have 1, 2, or 3 options. Maybe you might say the first option is for us to get water from the Zambezi River. But what if it's too expensive? Then we go to option B, which you then say maybe let's build a dam within the district. What again if it's too expensive? Then you might go to option 3, where you might say let's sink boreholes, which are deeper and can provide us with water. So we need to have those adaptation options, and they have to be costed as well. And they should not only be looking at the economic side of things. We need to go to look at the ecological side of things as well. If we take adaptation option A, what is going to be the impact of that adaptation option on our environment, on wildlife, and you weigh the benefits, and then also the social costs and benefits of adaptation measures, as well as the prioritizing the interventions that we intend to undertake. We need to estimate the implementation costs of the adaptation measures. This is often a big challenge. You get a person saying that climate change is a big issue in my district, or in my constituency, or in my area. But then the person then comes, yes, we are saying it's a big problem. How much money do you need for the interventions? And then suddenly go blame, because there's no costing or economic analysis that has been done. So we need to have that. It also helps us as we go to the international platforms, climate change negotiations, for example. It has been a big question, because if you look at climate change mitigation, which developed countries are more interested in, because if you mitigate against climate change, it helps everyone. You reduce the amount of GHGs in the atmosphere, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. The atmosphere or the climate becomes better for everyone, and everyone benefits. But for adaptation, well, it's sort of a local issue. If you have a bad maize crop, then because of a drought, then it's sort of a local issue, because you have to do something there, or else you die.
The project also involves the establishment of 10 standalone meteorological stations across the country to enhance the capacity of the Met Services Department in data collection.
This project is a project on climate change. And for us to be very comfortable, in order for us to be having, the standpoint where we can speak with authority on the issues of climate change impacting the community, early warning systems for the communities in order for them to be more prepared for disasters, there is need for a network of observing stations for the Met Services to be very, very strong. So in the design of this project, we ensured that we have also the provision to purchase equipment for the Met Services. So we've budgeted for 10 automatic standalone weather stations, which should be installed in the 10 provinces, just to complement what is already there. And these should be networked to the headquarters of the meteorological services in order for the Met Service to be more capacitated in terms of data provision.
Communities in action, that's the way to go. Communities in action, that's the way to go.
A stakeholder engagement plan has been designed towards building capacity to advance the national adaptation planning processes. The plan was presented at the launch by a representative of the delivery partner, United Nations Environment, who flew in from Nairobi, Kenya for the event. Mr. Goran was impressed with the way the project has kicked off in Zimbabwe, which is one of the 3 countries that has benefited from the green climate funding together with Malawi and Swaziland.
Yeah, I am very happy for what has happened here in Zimbabwe, seeing more than 100 participants from all the regions and also all the ministries and districts. That shows the commitment that the country has taken to move the climate agenda forward, particularly on national adaptation plan.
Mm-hmm. There were many issues that were coming up from students, from the administrators in the districts and all the other stakeholders wanting information. What does this say to you about the interest that Zimbabweans have towards climate change issues?
Yeah, that also gives us an idea of what stakeholders are expecting, particularly the student, the youth, what are they expecting from this process, and noting the questions which were very interesting questions, and I say that in the near future they are going to be involved particularly with a focus discussion group and also training for youth and other vulnerable groups. I'm very, very pleased and happy to see what have been in terms of discussion, interaction with stakeholders, particularly the women who attended, the parliament who came also to show the high level commitment of the country. That is really appreciated, and I think that is one of the good foundation that we are laying for the NAP process in Zimbabwe.
There's also the issue of the fact that most of the people affected are in the rural areas, the rural communities, and you were talking of indigenous knowledge systems and scientific proven approaches. How are these going to be measured in the process?
Okay, that is a very tricky question, and I think we know how knowledge are managed in rural communities, but for sure the NAP process want to also build on evidences. The evidence should be scientifically proved. That is where we are involving researchers and also people who have skill in terms of modeling. So, but on the other side, indigenous knowledge will also consider by drafting policies, by drafting measures, because at the end of the day, the measures we are proposing or we are selecting or we are adopting will be for those indigenous and villages. So we need to consider the point of view in crafting measures to ensure that what you have drafted or you are suggesting will be really honed by them and implemented by them.
Mm-hmm. So from today, do you see hope for this process in Zimbabwe?
Of course, obviously, I'm very optimistic, and I see that the commitment from all the officers from department, ministries, line ministries, and districts, those kind of reaction, discussion, question that they ask make me feel comfortable and confident that Zimbabwe is on the right way to tackle climate change, particularly put in place a very strong NAP process for the country.
One of the participants at the launch was the director of an organization based in Lupane district of Matabele North Province, one of the areas badly affected by climate change, who spoke of some of the climate change related projects in the province.
Quite a lot is happening in terms of climate change in Lupane, in Kusile district. It is actually not spelled out because climate change is almost a global issue, where even as Zimbabwean communities we are really getting the impact of climate change. Therefore, as an organization, in 2017, we also had an opportunity of reflecting and also try to respond to the needs of the community, whereby we were encouraged to start programming with a climate change lens.
Mm-hmm. So what sort of projects are on the ground that you are working on?
At the moment, we are doing projects which are aligned with the smart agriculture, and also we are trying to build the community resilience in terms of the current shocks. As you can see that with the trends of climate change, we are having a situation whereby, for example, rainfall pattern is really getting a different direction at all. So we are educating communities about the current changes in the climate, and also try to encourage them to have different farming methods which are part of smart agriculture, where they are supposed to be aware of the weather of the day or of the season.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say you have benefited from the launch of the National Adaptation Strategy here in Malawi?
This has been really a good eye-opener to see that the government of Zimbabwe actually is carrying the climate agenda forward, and also the government is trying to implement the international instruments, for example the Paris Agreement. And what I liked about this process is that so far we are having an opportunity of engaging with the government and civil society to see how we can help communities or urban cities in looking at issues of vulnerability concerning climate change.
Mm-hmm. We understand you also had a project with the Japanese embassy in Binga. Can you tell us about that project and how it was affected by the adverse effects of climate change?
Yes. That's a very interesting question. It reminds me of a nightmare, really, because when it was in 2016 when we were granted a grant by the Japanese embassy to implement a social human project in terms of infrastructure development in Binga at Nagapande Secondary School. It happened that as we were starting construction, there were heavy rains in Binga, such that of course we were lucky that we had not already started construction, but the school was affected, especially for the makeshift infrastructure which was there. It was destroyed by the hailstorm, and also children were really affected. A number of them were taken to Binga District Hospital and to other nearby health service centers. Of course we didn't experience any death, but it had a long negative effect in terms of the infrastructure by then that was destroyed by this this hailstorm, which was as a result of climate change trend. Yeah.
As this project is being rolled out, almost every citizen is expected to play their part in the adaptation strategies. Don't forget to make a date with us same time next week on the same program, Communities in Action. From those behind the scenes and me, goodbye.
You don't give a man a fish, but teach them how to feed. You don't give a man a fish, but teach them how to fish. Communities in action, that's the way to go. Communities in action, that's the way to go. You don't give a man a fish,